Welcome to the Rewilded Human podcast, where Dr. Lucille, holistic psychiatrist and psychotherapist, and Dr. Lynn, naturopath and nutritional consultant, help you reconnect with your true self. Through practical tips on mental health, nutrition, exercise, relationships, and spirituality, with a dash of humor, they tackle today's toughest issues to guide you back to a harmonious, vibrant life. Rediscover your natural self, just as nature intended.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Rewilded Human podcast. This episode was in no way inspired by the current political system or any politician you may or may not know. But today's topic will be about how to spot a liar. Dr. Lucille, where do we start on this juicy topic?
Yes. And it's coming a lot later in people's lives than it should. I think it's something that we should start teaching children about when they're very young, right?
Instead, we're teaching children to lie.
All right. Okay, so who among us has not lied? I mean, I certainly have. There's no question about that. And so we need to realize, first of all, so lying is about being out of alignment or out of integrity. And I think the essence of human beings is that we are in integrity. We feel better. We feel much better when we're in integrity and we're being honest, right?
Yes.
I think that's our true essence. I do not buy the line that, oh, well, humans are just horrible creatures who will lie to get their way. No, I don't believe that at all, because for some people who are non-sociopathic, lying
Yeah.
just eats away at you.
Yes.
So it's really, really important that you be in alignment with your integrity, because, as we know from the law of attraction, you will attract more people who are also honest, and you will have that inner sense of coherence, feeling good about yourself. I think that's really, really important. And then, of course, we need to know about how we're being lied to, right? We need to know. That's a valuable, valuable skill in our world. So whether it's your husband who's coming home late too many times and giving you odd excuses, or it's, as you said, it's a political figure, and the fate of your country depends on the integrity of this
Yeah.
this individual, right? Yeah, so I just wanted to put it out to you first, Lynn. Like, what is something that you've noticed helps you? Some observation that helps you know when somebody is lying.
Well, there are the obvious signs that people look for, right? Like the shifty eyes, they're not making eye contact and things like that. But for me, it's my intuition. I'm very in tune with my intuition. And
Right.
when I'm in a room with another person, I pick up on their vibe. And it's almost like this feeling that I get. So they don't have to be shifty or like the classic signs of a liar. I don't really need to see that in order to feel like just something's off, like what they're saying just doesn't match up with everything
With their
else.
behavior,
Yeah, with
right?
their behavior or the situation or just something feels off, and
Right.
I just kind of know. But I mean, obviously there are obvious signs that we can look for, right? When you're
Yeah,
dealing with someone. So what would be
absolutely.
some of the signs that you would look for, Lucia? Like, for example, in your practice, this is actually an interesting question. Do you have patients who will come and lie to you?
Everybody lies.
Okay.
Everybody
But not when you
lies.
go to a psychiatrist, then you have to tell the truth. Isn't that like rule
No,
number
no.
one?
And here, no, no, no,
Huh?
no. And a lot of psychiatric work has to do with getting past the bullshit to the real truth.
Ah,
Because you have to remember, we will lie to ourselves a lot, probably more than we lie to other people.
it's true.
So if we are ashamed of something about ourselves, and that shame is a really powerful incentive to lie, okay,
Yeah.
then we're just gonna hide things. How many times have I discovered that somebody who initially told me they weren't doing drugs and they weren't drinking, 3, 4 months later, you find out that they've been caught on a DUI, driving under the influence, right? How many have I caught in the lie of, oh, I've always been faithful to my spouse? Something happens and you find out not. So everybody lies to protect their ego.
Yeah.
However, the people who do much better in terms of their healing and growth are the ones who catch themselves in the lie, and they are very self-aware and very responsible, and they will own up to when they lie.
Mhm.
Right? And you can tell, just like when you said intuition, you can tell there'll be something inside of you that's listening to their words. And if they're lying, they may have a straight face that may sound very coherent and logical and the whole thing, but there's something inside of you that's going, I'm not so sure, right?
Yeah.
Intuition plays a big, big role in this, right? And the other experience, see, a lot of this also depends on knowing the person for a long period of time, because and some of the studies indicate this, that you want a baseline of behavior. You want to see a certain baseline of behavior. It shows you what the person is like under quote unquote normal circumstances, if they're not acutely stressed or there's some crisis going on or whatever. You want to see how they behave normally, because people say, oh yeah, shifty eyes are a really good sign of a liar. But there's some people whose eyes dart around a lot anyway, and it's not that they're lying. Happens to be maybe a neurological issue with them, or or something else. It's not an indicator for them.
Yes.
That they're lying.
Or
So
like people with Asperger's, they often won't look you in the eyes when they're talking to you. They look out
that's
into
right.
the space, and
Sure.
it doesn't mean
Absolutely.
they're lying, it's just their default setting.
That's right. That's exactly right. So the more you know a person in different contexts, the more you can then develop sort of a profile
Yeah.
of them, and then when they depart from that profile. That's an indicator that they're lying. And the other things that are very common are, this is so interesting how it happens out in the open, in the media all the time, when somebody, a politician or somebody, will say something that is in direct contradiction to something that has actually happened,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like, no, we did not bomb so and so first.
Yeah.
That's a lie. They bombed us first.
Oh,
But then
exactly.
there's the film footage, blah, 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 blah,
Yeah.
right? Sometimes the more certain a person comes across about an ambivalent situation, the more certain and confident they are, sometimes that's an indicator that they're lying.
Like,
Okay.
I did not have sexual relations with that woman.
Yes,
Like
right,
that one?
exactly.
Remember
That's
that?
like that one. Meanwhile, where did the lipstick come that's on your collar,
It
right?
wasn't
Like,
just lipstick.
yeah, right. Wasn't
It
just
was
lipstick.
it was other stuff.
Right, right. So sometimes, especially if it's an ambivalent and complicated situation and you're trying to get the truth out of somebody, if somebody says, I really don't know. I don't know exactly what happened. I know that I wasn't responsible for this part of it,
Yeah.
but I don't know the rest of it. And they come across as, not totally 100% confident. That gives you more of a sense that they may be telling the truth,
Yeah.
right?
Yes, absolutely.
So
Lucy-
that would be another indicator. Yeah.
Lucille, for example, I think the most common situation is it would be in a relationship when you want to know if your spouse is lying. So, for example, for a wife, what would be the signs to look for that your spouse is lying or cheating, just coming home and not telling the truth about where he's been, what he's doing after work, stuff like that? Are there any, like, other than the obvious lipstick stains on the collar, is there something else that we can look for?
Disappearing acts.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so where, they avoid talking about anything in depth. Like they just have really backed off of talking about anything other than logistics. Oh, are you taking the kids to the soccer game tonight? Da, 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 da. They're distancing themselves from you, and they are avoiding anything that gets that could get into a more intense conversation.
Do they
So,
do this in order to avoid lying to you? Because, if
well, sure, yeah, but to avoid being asked the awkward questions where they have to lie, right?
Yeah.
Right. So, if you're sensing that happening with your spouse, that there's a lie in there somewhere,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
So I'm trying to think of the many examples that I've heard over the years.
Tell us some stories.
Well, the obvious inconsistencies. Okay. So, for example, yes, sure, I'm texting a lot with this woman, but it's because we're work buddies, and we have developed a kind of a work friendship. But that it's inconsistent, that he's never done this or she's never done this before.
Yeah.
Okay. They don't have the same relationship with any other coworker. Right.
Yeah.
So that would be one thing. And again, it comes down to your partner well enough to know what the baseline is of their behavior, so that when they just start departing from it, you have got some idea that there's a deception going on. So any here's another really good one: change in spending habits. Okay. And especially if the woman is getting the credit card statements or she has access to them, and all of a sudden the spending has changed quite a bit, and he's going out an awful lot on, business dinners, right? That sort of thing. Now, the other thing that is really important here is people must be aware that a part of lying is manipulating the other person, right?
Yes.
Honey, I noticed that on your credit card statement here, like, you're spending hundreds and hundreds of dollars on these business dinners. Like, what's going on? Don't you trust me? Why are you questioning my spending habits? And so there's a lie there, because they're not answering the question directly. They're gaslighting you.
Yes.
Right? So the moment they don't answer the question directly, there's a deception in it. Right? And you really do not allow yourself to be gaslit. It's kind of like, at that point, I tell my clients that you become more like a lawyer. Just the facts, ma'am. Okay.
That's good.
Yes. Yeah, just the facts. Well, but you're not answering the question.
Yeah.
If there's nothing to this, why can't you give me a reason why the expenses for business dinners are going way up? So you have to really learn how to not be hooked on the manipulator's manipulations. The moment you get manipulations when you ask questions, there's a lie there.
That makes sense. Do you find there are a lot of women who actually know they're with a liar, but they don't want to know that they're lying? Like they know they're being lied to, but they lie to themselves about being lied to?
Absolutely.
I see this a lot.
Constantly, all the time. And then, the interesting thing is that then they will forget that they knew that it was a lie, and they rewrite the story. So, and then maybe they run across a diary from years ago where they actually wrote down, I think he's lying. I don't know what's the truth anymore. Oh, he said this, but he did that. I'm confused. That sort of thing, where they will go in and out of denial. They know something's wrong, and then they build a story that says, no, it's all okay, and so they forget what they learned before. And I have women who've gone through this kind of cycle for decades.
Wow.
Yeah, until something really bad happens and the whole marriage implodes. And then there is no denial at that point anymore.
Is this like a defense mechanism, or why do we do this to ourselves?
Yeah, they're totally, listen, they're totally afraid of their whole life collapsing, number one.
Yeah.
If I confront this guy, that could be the end of the marriage, and I don't know what I'd do with my life. My whole life would turn upside down, especially women who are financially dependent. Okay, so that's one thing. But the other thing that's really prominent is shame. Again, shame,
Yeah.
which is I am too ashamed to admit that I made this mistake and I stayed with this, you know what. I stayed and what, people will judge me.
Yeah.
They'll judge me like, how could you stay with this philanderer? How could you continue believing that he was straightforward and
Yeah.
honest? Yeah. And they don't, and shame is really such a toxic emotion because it imprisons people. It imprisons them in the story that I've got to make everything look like it's okay. I cannot change my life. I can't do anything. I just have to make sure that I maintain the lie that everything is okay. So they become liars too. They enable the lying to keep going. Yeah, it's a very, very sad situation.
What happens to children when they're constantly being lied to?
Well, now that's an interesting question because children will have many different reactions or coping strategies, depending on a whole bunch of factors to do with the child and how they are manipulated. Okay, so some children have a clear awareness right from the get-go. So they're amazing, where they know right off the bat, almost since they came out of the womb, that they're being lied to. Something is wrong here.
Yeah.
And they may learn to shut up, or they may learn to push a little bit to see if, what they're thinking is correct. But they're the ones who do much better because they never, ever violate their own judgment. They hold their own judgment. They may look on the outside like they're not rocking the boat. They're not going to rock the boat and point out all the lies.
Yeah.
Like, I know my dad's sneaking into my sister's bedroom in the middle of the night, doing whatever, right? And some of them come out and use it to really good advantage as they grow up. Like these are the investigative journalists in our world, who accept nothing on face value, and they're always questioning and always digging for the truth, right? And they are fearless and relentless. So that's one way that it can happen. At the other extreme are the kids who their judgment never develops. It's kind of like they are stuck in a state of believing everything. They believe everything on face value. Like, you tell me that, that you're Jesus Christ. Okay, you're Jesus Christ. And they run into huge problems because they're taken advantage of right, left, and center. So they have never, as I say, they've never learned to develop their judgment, and there's nobody in their environment that will help them, that will say, but your dad did this, but he said something different. And nobody does that. Everybody, because everybody's parading around, playing their parts in this drama. And the child just naively goes along with the whole thing. And they then attract liars into their lives, people who take advantage of them, people who will manipulate them. And that's a very, very sad state of affairs.
Yeah, it becomes like a vicious circle.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then there's everything in between, right? So everybody's somewhat different in how they react to it, but it's a real form of emotional abuse to lie to children. It really
Absolutely.
is. Yeah.
Lucia, let's talk about the 5 common physical signs, physical signs, the ways to spot a liar. Okay, I'm going to give you 5 and let me know what you think of these. So number 1, inconsistent eye contact, either avoiding eye contact entirely or holding it too intensely. Liars may overcompensate to seem more believable. When it's true, it's true.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. That can be true. But you also have to remember that insecure people, they're not necessarily lying, but sometimes insecure people, their eye contact may not be very, very consistent. Their eyes may dart around, whatever, you know.
Yeah.
So I would say everything you mentioned, what you mentioned is true, but it's not true in all cases,
Which is
right?
important to know. It's important to know the
Abs
difference. Because you don't want to
Absolutely.
accuse someone of lying when in fact it's just their normal behavior.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
number two, touching the face or mouth. Covering the mouth, rubbing the nose, or touching the face are subconscious attempts to hold back the lie or self-soothe.
Well, yes, self-soothing also that is one reason that people do that. It's an unconscious maneuver. Yes, if you find that the person is doing it more in a certain situation where there's maybe an awkward conversation going on, that can be an indication of lying. But it also can be other things. So again, it's not 100%. Some people are just habitually touching their face. Sometimes that is a way of regrounding themselves or stimulating their brain. Okay.
Really? I never
Yeah.
thought of it that way. That's so interesting.
Yes. Yes. Because if they are, like, for example, people with ADD, sometimes they need to touch themselves or stimulate themselves or tap or do something to keep their brain focused and alert. Okay. As you said, it can also be self-soothing. If they're feeling like they're having an intense emotional reaction, they will touch themselves to self-soothe for
Yeah.
sure.
Or they're on the spot, they're feeling on the spot by your questions, they may be reacting.
Yes. And it may not be that they're lying. It just may be that they were always shamed because they were asked in class, the answer to a question and they didn't know, and then they were shamed
Yeah.
for it. So
Yeah.
it triggers an anxious response,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. That's quite possible.
Mhm.
Number three, fidgeting or restlessness, shifting weight, tapping fingers, or bouncing a leg can signal nervousness, especially if it's out of character.
Well, it's the out of character part that
Mhm.
is the key.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Absolutely, it is. But then again, that can also happen if you are extremely bored and your brain is going offline, like in a business meeting and a committee meeting, whatever. So it is the context is very, very important. So many people in our world do have ADD or other neurological issues.
Mhm.
They're going to fidget, they're going to be restless. That also happens with people who are anxious, who have other issues going on. So again, it has to be very nuanced and very conditional on the context
Yeah.
and what you already know about that person.
Yeah. And this is why it's important to listen to your intuition as well. Not
Yes.
just look for these signs, but listen to your intuition. Number four, speech changes. Speaking too quickly, too slowly, or changing pitch suddenly. Liars might also repeat words or phrases to buy time. And also, I find
Mhm.
sometimes they make up a big story, like rather than just saying, "Oh no, I couldn't come last night," "Oh, I couldn't come last night because my dogs think this is what happened. Then we had to go to the hospital, and then after the
Yeah,
hospital,
yeah,
the car
yeah.
broke down." Sometimes they make this huge story, right?
Yeah, I've had that where they're building a real strong case by putting in everything, including the kitchen sink, right?
But
You
speech
know,
changes. Could speech changes indicate that someone's lying to you?
they yes, again, but again, you have to be cautious because sometimes it may be due to other reasons,
Yeah,
right? They may speech changes may occur because they don't want to tell a lie, but they just might be very uncomfortable with the subject matter.
hmm
Okay. Or they are something you've said or something that's come into their mind has triggered them. There's a memory that's popped in that
yeah,
really upsets them. And it could also be due to confusion. You'll notice that people's intonations and voice change and everything will change when they're kind of confused. Like they start thinking, oh, yeah, okay, I got it. And then they start getting confused and they start, memory starts getting fuzzy, and you will notice that they might slow down or whatever. And also, people in high stress, they come into my office in very high stress and they're going a mile a minute and telling
yeah,
me these stories and they're practically jumping off the chair. And then and then as they calm down, then the voice relaxes and it's, and then it flows much more easily, right?
Yes.
So again, context is very, very
Very
important.
important. Absolutely. And I have one more for you. Number 5, mismatch between words and body language. Saying I'm confident while physically shrinking or shaking the head. When verbal and nonverbal cues don't align, it raises red flags.
Of course, as it should. Yes, I think
Yeah.
that's a really good marker. Let's also note, however, that is again something that you have to be cautious about.
Mhm.
There are people who will, for example, smile when they're telling you an awful story about something bad that happened. They're telling you about a motor vehicle accident that they were in, and they're smiling through the whole thing, and you're going, "Oh
Yeah,
my
what's up
God."
with that? I have seen that.
Yes, and it's their own attempt to not activate themselves, to distance themselves from the really painful feelings
Mhm.
and lighten it up. Kind of lighten it up. Ha 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 ha. That happened a long time ago, and wasn't I stupid? I signaled left when I wanted to go right. Blah blah blah. And that is something you have to watch. But again, a lot of people do that as a defense against feeling their own emotions.
Yeah.
Okay, but you're right. It's one of the more effective ways of triggering your red flag.
Yeah.
There may be something else here, but you just have to watch that person very carefully. A lot of these people don't even know that they're doing it, which is very interesting. If you point out, "Hey, listen, you're telling me this horrible story of your
Yeah.
motor vehicle accident you were in a long time ago, but you're smiling. Really? Am I?"
Crisis actors do this a lot. When you
Yes,
see them,
yes,
and
yes.
it's like their child just died or something, and they're there, haha, laughing and smiling. But yeah,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
another story.
yes.
So, Lucille, before we wrap this up, anything else that we missed in this list? Anything else to look for as far as
I think
physical signs?
one of the things I really want to stress, especially for women,
Mm-hmm.
always, always, always pay attention to your intuition. Yes, we all have that issue, right? We've been
Yeah.
taught to be nice. We've been taught that we should take everything people tell us at face value. We never, if a negative thought or a red flag comes into our mind, oh, well, we're just being judgmental,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I would say there's a reason why you're having the reaction. And it may not be that the person you're talking to is an axe murderer, but it may be that you are picking up something, they're triggering something in you that needs to be looked at.
Yeah.
Okay. So I would say to women, never throw the baby out with the bathwater. If you're having an feeling about somebody, just hold on to it, file it at least in the back of your mind, and then maybe you'll get more evidence as time goes on as to whether there are clues, evidence or clues about why you might be feeling that way.
Absolutely. Makes so much sense.
Yeah.
Lucille, we started this episode with politicians, so let's finish with politicians. So, how do we know a politician is lying? His lips are moving.
That's right. That's right. Yes. Yeah.
So, thank you everyone for watching this episode. Hope we helped you a little bit with spotting a liar near you. Hopefully, you don't have any liars near you, but if you do, it's really important to get to the root of the problem and find out why you're being lied to. And guys, don't forget to like, subscribe, share this video or podcast with someone that you know, and make sure you give us a 5-star review. We do like those. And we'll see you in the next one. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning into the Rewilded Human podcast. We hope you're leaving with insights to reconnect with your natural, vibrant self. Remember, the information shared here is for educational and inspirational purposes only and is not a substitute for medical advice. Always consult a qualified healthcare provider for any personal health concerns. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, subscribe, and share it with others who might benefit. We'll see you next time, ready to dive even deeper. Stay wild, stay true, and stay tuned.